So, with the recent recusal of Attorney General Jeff Sessions in any investigations involving the Trump campaign and Russia, um, the Russian controversy has the flames of the Russian controversy have been stoked, and the Democrat establishment and the media is absolutely jumping on the opportunity to look at this as another example of collusion between the Trump campaign and the Russian government. It's the narrative that has constantly been put forward that is at the forefront of the media and the Democratic establishment, and they are not letting it go. And it's really it's getting to a very heated point, and it's coming to a head. And I mean, it has to be. This stuff is all getting really intense. These are very serious allegations. You're basically saying that either the president of the United States is a Russian agent, or the people working for him, people in his campaign, are Russian agents. So huge allegations. And what I want to do is I want to break it all down. I want to start from when the investigation started, when did concerns arise that there may have been collusion between the Trump campaign and the Russian government, all the way through to Attorney General Jeff Sessions recusing himself from the investigations. And really, one area that really broke this out into the mainstream and really started to push the narrative hard that there was collusion between the Trump campaign and the Russian government was this article here from the New York Times. This is where I think is a good starting point. This is January 19th this year. Intercepted Russian communications, part of inquiry into Trump associates. American law enforcement and intelligence agencies are examining intercepted communications and financial transactions as part of a broad investigation into possible links between Russian officials and associates of President-elect Donald J. Trump, including his former campaign chairman Paul Manafort, current and former senior American officials said. The continuing counterintelligence investigations means that Mr. Trump will take the oath of office on Friday with the associates under investigation, and the intelligence agencies concluded that the Russian government had worked to help him to help elect him. As president, Mr. Trump will oversee those agencies and have the authority to redirect or stop at least some of these efforts. So back in January, the Times came out and was saying that the intelligence communities were gathering this information, that they were monitoring people within the Trump campaign, and that they felt like there was collusion. It's not clear whether the intercepted communications had anything to do with Mr. Trump's campaign or Mr. Trump himself. So they admit right there that they're not sure if he has anything even to do with it. It's also unclear whether the inquiry has anything to do with an investigation into the hacking of the Democratic National Committee's computers and other attempts to disrupt the elections in November. The American government has concluded that the Russian government was responsible for a broad computer hacking campaign, including the operation against the DNC. The counterintelligence investigation centers, at least in part, on the dealings that some of the president-elect's past and present advisors have had with Russia. Mr. Manafort has done business in Ukraine and Russia. Some of his contacts that were under surveillance by the National Security Agency for suspected links to Russia's Federal Security Service, one of the officials said. And Paul Manafort, he did consulting in the Ukraine, and there were some possibly shady financial ties, but nothing of any real consequence. And I mean, really nothing at all. I mean, he did consulting for a pro-Russian government in Ukraine, and because of that, they try to say that he's basically a Russian agent. And really, with Manafort, he was the only one who even had a tenuous link, really, in any kind of substantial way, or potentially substantial way, to Russia. When you look at Carter Page, when you look at Roger Stone, he had nothing to do with Russia. They try to say because he got information to WikiLeaks, or information from WikiLeaks, that he was colluding with the Russians, because they say that, of course, the hacked information was given to WikiLeaks from Russia. So that was the link they tried to make there. And then it continues on here. The Mr. Manafort is among at least 3 Trump campaign advisors whose possible links to Russia are under scrutiny. 2 others are Carter Page, a businessman and former policy advisor to the campaign, and Roger Stone, a longtime Republican operative. Okay, so this New York Times article admits that they were being spied on by the intelligence agencies, and this next article here really breaks down well what this means. What this means that they were actually spying on these people, that the intelligence agencies were spying on these people, and it breaks down what would give them the authority to do so, because they're spying on them, saying that they're suspecting they are foreign agents, basically. And that goes through a system called FISA, which is the FISA Court, Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. And this court selects whether or not the intelligence agencies can actually spy on individuals suspected of being foreign agents. So this article here is from the National Review. This was just a couple days ago. The Obama camp's disingenuous denials on FISA surveillance of Trump. And this is because just recently Obama and his lackeys came out and they said that, oh, we never authorized any wiretapping of Trump Tower. We never, authorized any of this stuff. And this really breaks that down. To summarize, reporting indicates that prior to June 2016, the Obama Justice Department and FBI considered a criminal investigation of Trump associates, and perhaps Trump himself, based on concerns about connections to the Russian financial institutions. Preliminary poking around indicated that there was nothing criminal involved. Rather than shut the case down, though, the Obama Justice Department converted it into a national security investigation under the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, FISA. FISA allows the government, if it gets court permission, to conduct electronic surveillance, which could include wiretapping, monitoring of email, and the like, against those it alleges are, quote, agents of a foreign power. FISA applications and the evidence gathered from them are classified, i.e. we would not know about any of this unless someone has leaked classified information to the media, a felony. So all that stuff that the New York Times got, all that information, basically, especially who was being surveilled, and that doesn't mean that those were the only people that were being surveilled. That was just what was leaked to the media. That was illegal for them to get that, for that information to be leaked. So the people that leaked that were doing something illegal. It says here, in June, the Obama Justice Department submitted an application that apparently named Trump in addition to some of his associates. As I have stressed, it is unclear whether named in this context indicates that Trump himself was cited as a person the Justice Department was alleging was a Russian agent whom it wanted to surveil. It could instead mean that Trump's name was merely mentioned in an application that sought to conduct surveillance on other alleged Russian agents. President Trump's tweets on Saturday claimed that President Obama tapped my phones, which makes it more likely that Trump was targeted for surveillance rather than merely mentioned in the application. In any event, the FISA court reportedly turned down the Obama Justice Department's request, which is notable. The FISA court is notoriously solicitous of government requests to conduct national security surveillance, although, as I've noted over the years, the claim by many that it's a rubber stamp is overblown. Not taking no for an answer, the Obama Justice Department evidently returned to the FISA court in October 2016, the critical final weeks of the presidential campaign. This time, the Justice Department submitted a narrowly tailored application that did not mention Trump. The court apparently granted it, authorizing surveillance of some Trump associates. It's unknown whether the surveillance is still underway, but the New York Times has identified, again, based on illegal leaks of classified information, at least 3 of its targets. Paul Manafort, the former Trump campaign chairman who was ousted in August, and 2 others whose connection to the Trump campaign was loose at best. Manafort's former political consulting business partner Roger Stone and investor Carter Page. So they got turned down because there wasn't enough information to actually build a case to actually pursue it. And then they come back, that was in June, and then they come back in October, they try again, and they narrow it down. So it seems like at first they may very well have been trying to directly target Trump, and that actually got shot down, even though the FISA court almost always is very lenient to the government, usually approves this kind of stuff for the government. But they came back. They came back at it in October, just before the election, and they actually got approved. And then this stuff starts getting leaked to the media illegally. So what it seems like is that it's an effort by the intelligence community to undermine the Trump campaign, because it doesn't seem like there was enough to really pursue these allegations to the extent that they did. Not nearly. And the article here goes on. Trump's tweet on Saturday prompted some interesting denials from the Obama camp. These can be summarized in a statement put out by Obama spokesman Kevin Lewis. A cardinal rule of the Obama administration was that no White House official ever interfered with any independent investigation led by the Department of Justice. As part of this practice, neither President Obama nor any White House official ever ordered surveillance on any U.S. citizen. Any suggestion otherwise is simply false. This seems disingenuous on several levels. First, as Obama officials well know, under the FISA process, it is technically the FISA court that orders surveillance, and by that statute, it is the Justice Department, not the White House, that represents the government in proceedings before the FISA court. So the issue is not whether Obama or some member of his White House staff ordered surveillance of Trump and his associates. The issue is A, whether the Obama Justice Department sought such surveillance authorization from the FISA court, and B, whether, if the Justice Department did that, the White House was aware of or complicit in the decision to do so. Personally, given the explosive and controversial nature of the surveillance request we're talking about, an application to wiretap the presidential candidate of the opposition party and some of his associates during the heat of a presidential campaign, based on the allegation that the candidate and his associates were acting as Russian agents, it seems to me that there is less than zero chance that that could have happened without consultation between the Justice Department and the White House. And seriously, I mean, if you believe that these intelligence communities or agencies were targeting Trump and people in the Trump campaign as potentially being Russian agents and submitted 2 FISA court applications, one of which got shot down, and that nobody in Obama's White House, or Obama himself for that matter, knew about this, to believe that is truly absurd. And when Trump made these tweets, he was saying that basically Obama wired Trump Tower, and people, in the media and these Democrats are coming out and saying, well, Obama himself didn't actually say, hey, do this wiretapping on Trump Tower, but doesn't need to be the case, because it's people in Obama's executive branch, people in the intelligence communities that were appointed by Obama, and headed by people that were appointed by Obama, that are pursuing these investigations. And like this article just pointed out, the idea that Obama didn't know that this was going on, or people in Obama's White House didn't know that this was going on, is absurd. They absolutely knew. And if it turns out that this was a witch hunt, and basically if it turns out that Obama did, because it's not certain that he didn't, if he did order this to happen, this what appears to be a witch hunt to happen, that's a huge deal. This would be a much bigger scandal than Watergate. This would be massive. And now I want to go to the actual FBI report. So this is the actual report from the FBI that came out in January 6th. That was their report on the supposed Russian hacking of the election. So the report is called Background to Assessing Russian Activities and Intentions in Recent U.S. Elections, the Analytic Process and Cyber Intent Attribution. Russian efforts to influence the 2016 U.S. presidential election represent the most recent expression of Moscow's long-standing desire to undermine the U.S.-led liberal democratic order. But these activities demonstrated a significant escalation in directness, level of activity, and scope of effort compared to previous operations. We assess Russian President Vladimir Putin ordered an influence campaign in 2016 aimed at the U.S. presidential election. Russia's goals were to undermine public faith in the U.S. Democratic process, denigrate Secretary Clinton, and harm her electability and potential presidency. We further assess Putin and the Russian government developed a clear preference for President-elect Trump. We have high confidence in these judgments. So this is just them saying that they're not actually presenting the evidence. They're just saying that this is the conclusions that we've come to, and they're saying that not only were the Russians trying to undermine Hillary Clinton, but that they were actually actively trying to also make Trump in particular president. So this is the narrative that they're saying. We also assess Putin and the Russian government aspire to help President-elect Trump's election chances when possible by discrediting Secretary Clinton and publicly contrasting her unfavorability to him. All three agencies agree with this judgment. CIA and FBI have high confidence in this judgment. NSA has moderate confidence. Moscow's approach evolved over the course of the campaign based on Russia's understanding of the electoral prospects of the two main candidates. When it appeared to Moscow that Secretary Clinton was likely to win the election, give me a break, the Russian influence campaign began to focus more on undermining her future presidency. Further information has come to light since Election Day that, when combined with Russian behavior since early November 2016, increases our confidence in our assessments of Russian motivations and goals. Moscow's influence campaign followed a Russian messaging strategy that blends covert intelligence operations, such as cyber activity, with overt efforts by the Russian government agencies, state-funded media, third-party intermediaries, and paid social media users, or trolls. Yeah, Russia's army of trolls is what got Trump elected. Russia, like its Soviet predecessor, has a history of conducting covert influence campaigns focused on U.S. presidential elections that have used intelligence officers and agents and press placements to disparage candidates perceived as hostile to the Kremlin. Russia's intelligence services conducted cyber operations against targets associated with the 2016 U.S. presidential election, including targets associated with both major U.S. political parties. We assess with high confidence that Russian military intelligence, General Staff Main Intelligence Directorate, or GRU, used the Guccifer 2.0 persona in DC leaks to release U.S. victim data. This report is a declassified version of a highly classified assessment. Its conclusions are identical to those in the highly classified assessment, but this version does not include the full supporting information on key elements of the influence campaign. Yeah, so in other words, it doesn't provide the evidence, the actual evidence. We just have to take their word on all of this stuff. And I mean, they're saying things like there was, trolls, an army of trolls, hired by Vladimir Putin, when we know, you can look up articles where you can see that the CIA actually in a lot of cases winds up hiring trolls to do its bidding. I mean, it's ridiculous. There's all different types of trolls out there on the internet. And this whole idea that trolls and fake news and stuff like that really influence people. I mean, here's the thing. The leaks, if they did come from the Russians, or the hacks, if they did come from the Russians, they were real. No one denied that any of that stuff was real. So it was showing, real criminal behavior, real collusion between the media and, the DNC and Hillary Clinton. And I mean, CNN was giving Hillary questions, debate questions early on, town hall debate questions early on, and things of that sort. And so this report comes out, and it's just, it provides no evidence, and it just makes this assessment that not only was Vladimir Putin, personally responsible for this campaign to undermine Hillary Clinton, but he was also selected Trump and wanted Trump in particular to be president. I mean, that is such a wild, wild claim. It's absolutely unbelievable. And it goes on here. The end is obtained in cyber operations publicly and in exclusives to media outlets and relayed materials to WikiLeaks. Russian intelligence obtained and maintained access to elements of multiple U.S. state or local electoral boards. DHS assesses that the types of systems Russian actors targeted or compromised were not involved in vote tallying. So right there, they admit, so they say that some Russian hackers that we just have to take their word on that were linked not only to Russia, but to Vladimir Putin himself, actually had access to the electoral boards. But then they admit that they didn't have access. They didn't actually change any vote tallies. They didn't actually get into the systems that were able to change votes. All that says here is that they had access to the system. Not that they even entered it or were able to enter it, but they had access, supposedly. And I mean, that's amazing there, because the whole narrative that you heard in the media was that Russia hacked the election. And to most people, that means Russia hacked the election, like literally, like they hacked into our, voting machines and changed it from Trump or from Hillary to Trump, which their own report here says that did not happen, very specifically. Very important to note. Russia's state-run propaganda machine contributed to the influence campaign by serving as a platform for Kremlin messaging to Russian and international audiences. We assess Moscow will apply lessons learned from its Putin-ordered campaign aimed at the U.S. presidential election to future influence efforts worldwide, including U.S. allies and their election process. So now, if anyone pops up, if Marie Le Pen is a populist who wants to get out of the European Union and wants there to not be completely wide open borders in France, then they can just say that she's a Russian agent. I mean, isn't that just convenient? Now they can just say anyone's a Russian agent, because Putin's gonna see what he did here, and he's gonna be like, oh well, I can take over the world now with my army of trolls. I mean, absolute insanity. When you can look it up, I mean, we get hacked by all kinds of people. Everyone's hacking everybody. Everyone's spying on everybody. And you can look it up. We get hacked by China way, 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 way more than Russia. And I want to go through here and I want to point out some individuals who actually don't think that it was Russia that hacked us. They think there was another side to the story. So this is from Sputnik News. Exclusive. Source of DNC Podesta leaks come from within Washington. This is from, let's see, this is 11/2/16. According to former British ambassador to Uzbekistan, Craig Murray, the now infamous Podesta and Democratic National Committee emails were not leaked by Russian hackers, but by a Washington insider. In an exclusive interview with Sputnik, Mr. Murray said, quote, "The source of these emails and leaks has nothing to do with Russia at all. I discovered what the source was when I attended the Sam Adams Whistleblower Award in Washington. The source of these emails comes from within official circles in Washington, D.C. You should look to Washington, not to Moscow." And we have more credible people. This was the former British ambassador to Uzbekistan. Not sure I could tell you where that's at on a map, but he's still an important guy, all right? So now this next article here is from InfoWars, and it's actually two articles. So one's from November 2nd, 2016, the other's from December 14th, 2016. The first one here, Judge, U.S. intelligence likely leaked DNC emails, not Russians. Appearing on Varney & Co., Judge Andrew Napolitano told Stuart Varney that he has a source inside the intelligence community who is adamant that insiders leaked the damning emails to WikiLeaks and that Vladimir Putin and Russia had nothing to do with it. There is, quote, "there is no evidence this was done by the Russians," Napolitano stated, adding, "but there is evidence for this. Who was harmed by Ms. Clinton's extremely careless use of state secrets? Whose agents' lives were jeopardized by her failure to keep those state secrets? The American intelligence communities." Quote, it's more likely than not that members of the American intelligence community leaked this to Julian Assange than that the Russians did. The suggestion comes from members of the intelligence community, Napolitano noted. And that completely makes sense, because when you look at how Hillary Clinton handled her private email server, and when you look at Hillary Clinton's temperament, and the way she handled the situation in Benghazi, and we came, we saw, he died, talking about taking out Gaddafi in Libya and turning that place into an absolute hellhole. She was an absolute psycho woman, and she was very reckless with classified information, and people in the intelligence community don't like that. And I think it's very likely that at least some of these were leaks from the intelligence community, absolutely. And there's more people who agree with this assessment. William Benny, NSA whistleblower and former technical head of the NSA, also told InfoWars back in August that the email leaks, which have negatively impacted the Democratic Party, were carried out by individuals within the U.S. intelligence community who were angry at Hillary exposing classified information and sought to take revenge. Quote, Hillary has a problem with NSA because she compromised gamma material, Benny said. This is the most sensitive material at the NSA. And William Benny, the former technical head of the NSA, that's a big, that's pretty big time, because that's one of the top people in the NSA, and I'm sure he's still got plenty of contacts within the intelligence community, and now he's coming out and saying that, it was, at least in part, probably leaks from within. And he goes on to say, Hillary has a problem with NSA, sorry, that's what I already read that. And so there was a number of NSA officials complaining to the press or to the people who wrote the article that she did that. She lifted gamma material, the material that was in her emails, directly out of gamma reporting. That is a direct compromise of the most sensitive material in the NSA, he added. Quote, she's got a real problem there. There are many people who have problems with what she has done in the past, so I don't necessarily look at the Russians as the only ones who got into those emails, Benny concluded. Former Deputy Assistant Secretary of State Steve Pieczenik also claimed that elements within the U.S. government, including the FBI and CIA, have initiated a counter-coup through Julian Assange and WikiLeaks in order to stop Hillary Clinton becoming the President of the United States. A very scary prospect indeed. Pieczenik asserted that Assange had released emails that we gave to him in order to undermine Hillary and Bill Clinton. So, who knows? Nobody really knows. From the intelligence communities, the establishment part of the intelligence communities, you've got the story that basically all this stuff came from Russian hacking. But then you've got very credible people, like the people I just mentioned, coming out and saying that there's another side to the story, that it could be leaks. There was so much information that came out, and it was so easy to hack into the DNC system that I feel like it was probably multiple sources, and I do think it's very possible that some of it came from leaks from within. I mean, just look at the fact that Rich, oh gosh, I forget his name, but he was a DNC staffer who supported Bernie Sanders, and he wound up getting shot down. He got gunned down in D.C. They said it was a robbery, but nothing was actually taken from him. And then it turns out that Julian Assange was putting out a cash reward for any information that led to Seth Rich, that was his name, Seth Rich, that led to Seth Rich's killer. So, seems like that guy might have been a source of some of this stuff. But who knows? That's definitely just speculation on my side. But now we go into an article here that shows a little bit of a counter side to the narrative that all the Russians wanted was to undermine Hillary and the Democrats and to prop up Trump and presumably the Republican Party, because that's the party that he's part of. In any case, this didn't get put into part of the report, not that I saw. This is from The Hill. This was December 15th last year. Report, Russians failed to hack DNC. Russian hackers were unsuccessful in their attempts to breach the Republican National Committee, RNC, the Wall Street Journal reported on Thursday. So they didn't just try to hack the Democrats, they tried to hack the Republicans too. They were successful with the Democrats, though. U.S. officials briefed on the attempted intrusion told the publication that the alleged hackers used the same methods that allowed them to hack the Democratic National Committee, but were ultimately thwarted by the RNC cybersecurity systems. According to the report, RNC officials became concerned that they would also be targeted by hackers after the DNC breach was made public. However, after contacting a security firm and the FBI, a closer inspection reportedly revealed that dangerous emails similar to those used to gain access to the DNC accounts have been blocked by the organization's cyber defenses. So this opens up the question, why was the DNC wide open to be hacked in the first place? And why didn't they take steps to prevent this from actually occurring? You know, and take really hard steps to prevent it from occurring in the future. I think they may have improved their systems somewhat, but that really is something, as a question that needs to be asked. Why were they asked? Why were they so susceptible to being hacked in the first place? And then you really never heard the media talk about the fact that the RNC was hacked as well, or they attempted to hack the RNC and they were unsuccessful. So that right there shows another side to the official establishment narrative. And believe me, that's not the end. So this is from the Daily Caller here, and this goes to show, so they're talking about the Russians hacking the systems, but then they admit in the FBI report that they had access, quote unquote, but they didn't actually get into the systems and they didn't actually change any vote tallies, is what they're saying. They weren't able to do that. Well, they weren't the only people hacking on that day. From the Daily Caller, this was in February 21st this year. Exclusive: Obama's feds tried to hack Indiana's election system while Pence was governor. Department of Homeland Security, DHS officials tried to hack Indiana's state electoral system with at least 14,800 scans or hits between November 1st, 2016 and December 16th, 2016, the Daily Caller News Foundation investigative group has learned. The attacks are the second confirmed IT scanning assault by DHS officials against states that resisted then-President Barack Obama's attempt to increase federal involvement in state and local election systems by designating them as, quote, critical infrastructure for national security. And that critical infrastructure thing is important. We'll get to that a little bit more later. Indiana Secretary of State Connie Lawson, the incoming president of the association, told the DCNF Tuesday that, quote, we know that between November 1st and December 16th, we were scanned about 14,800 scans, nearly 15,000 different times. The state's IT team traced the intruder to a DHS computer's IP address. They just traced it right back to the Department of Homeland Security. The same DHS unit attempted 10 times in 2016 to hack into the Georgia electoral system. They tried to get Georgia too. Federal officials are barred under DHS rules from trying to penetrate a state system without the express approval of the state. Neither Georgia nor Indiana approved of the DHS scanning attempts. So they're talking about, Russian hacking, but no one's talking about the Department of Homeland Security hacking, going around and meddling in the Indiana and the Georgia election systems. Now, what in the world were they doing? They didn't have permission to be doing that. So, you don't really hear the media talking about this too much. This is something that is definitely concerning. I mean, it was concerning to these states. They were, definitely wondering why the Department of Homeland Security was attempting to break into their systems without permission. The DHS Inspector General has launched an investigation into the Georgia breach attempt. Thomas Vesley, IT Director for the Indiana Secretary of State, told the DCNF that, quote, we kindly declined DHS assistance because we were very comfortable in the work we were doing in monitoring our election system. So they were telling them, hey, we're good. We got this handled. Our system's secure. We've tested it. It's fine. And they need to have permission to be able to do this. But they went ahead and did it anyways. And this is at the same time that Obama was pushing for it to be considered critical infrastructure, for the the election systems to be considered critical infrastructure, which would mean the federal government basically could do this sort of thing and has, authority over the election systems, and someone like the Department of Homeland Security head at the time, Jay Johnson, under Obama will be the kind of person implementing this sort of stuff. And it's definitely interesting to look into Jay Johnson, because this is the guy who was the former head of the Department of Homeland Security. This is someone who's supposed to be nonpartisan, right? He works for the president. He's supposed to just carry out the law as it is, and you're not supposed to get involved in partisan politics. Well, not old Jay Johnson. No, he definitely was very vocal about the fact that he was openly against the Trump administration. And then you've got the Department of Homeland Security meddling around in the election systems. I mean, that's shady. And this article here is from the American Mirror. This is August 30th, 2016. Homeland election czar picks sides. Trump policies, quote, un-American and irresponsible. This is from the Department of Homeland Security. Jay Johnson said these things. If the Department of Homeland Security attempts to seize oversight of American elections from states in the name of national security, Hillary Clinton will have the new election czar in her corner. The Washington Examiner reported on Tuesday, quote, we should carefully consider whether our election system, our election process is critical infrastructure like the financial sector, like the power grid, Homeland Security Secretary Jay Johnson said. There is a vital national interest in our election process, so I do think we need to consider whether it should be considered by my department and others critical infrastructure, he said at a media conference earlier this month hosted by the Christian Science Monitor. We should really carefully consider whether our election system, our election process, is critical infrastructure like the financial sector, like the power grid, Homeland Security Secretary Jay Johnson said. Johnson tore into Trump during an appearance on MSNBC in December, deeming his policies irresponsible, unconstitutional, and even un-American. So at the same time he's pushing for the feds to oversee the elections, he's also trashing Trump and the Trump administration. That is completely unprecedented. Quote, Johnson said, as the Secretary of Homeland Security, I have avoided responding to the political season and what candidates have said running for president. However, I believe that it's the responsibility of those of us in the national security and Homeland Security when a leading candidate for office proposes something that is irresponsible, probably illegal, unconstitutional, and contrary to international law, un-American, and will actually hurt our efforts at Homeland Security and national security, we have to speak out. So we're in an age right now that involves terrorist-inspired as well as terrorist-directed attack. The Islamic State has targeted the Muslim community, and it is all more important that we reach out and build bridges to American Muslims and to American Muslim communities. We've been doing this a lot lately, and it's important that we continue to do that, working with the Muslim community, not driving them away, not vilifying them, not driving them into shadows is absolutely critical in our national security efforts. So those of us in government have to speak out about this proposal, this idea. So people that are leaving these countries a lot of the times are trying to escape the terrorism. Okay, and we're trying to keep the terrorism out. It's as simple as that. So that's absolutely insane. And the fact that he's openly coming out against the Trump campaign is absolutely insane. And then you had Obama just pushing as hard as he could, putting all of his political weight behind Hillary Clinton to try to pass the torch on to her, and saying that Donald Trump would be horrible for America. And then you've got, the Department of Homeland Security meddling in the election. All this stuff paints a very suspicious picture, okay? You've got someone like Jay Johnson who's clearly got a political ideology that motivates him enough to actually speak out against the potential president of the United States. So, that's incredible, and that goes to show a little bit of insight into what's going through his head, and, that makes it more likely that he would be willing to do some potentially illegal activity, and do what's within his power as the head of the Department of Homeland Security to try to undermine the Trump campaign, and potentially, you know, make it seem like he's, colluded in an effort to make it seem like he's a Russian agent when it's a complete and total witch hunt. And the rhetoric of the whole Russian campaign really starts coming to a head when stuff like this came out. This was something that was given to BuzzFeed. It was a dossier, and this is explained in an article from the Daily Caller here. BuzzFeed could be in legal trouble for publishing Trump doc. While BuzzFeed weathers criticism, this was January 12th, 2017. While BuzzFeed weathers criticism for publishing a document cache containing unsubstantiated and scandalous allegations about President-elect Donald Trump and his confidants, they also could face legal consequences. The organization elected to publish a 35-page dossier claiming Russian operatives had compromising personal and financial information about the president-elect and others in his orbit. The documents were compiled by a former British intelligence officer working for a private intelligence firm in London on the behest of Trump's political opponents. They were later shared with Democratic political operatives and members of Congress. So this stuff was this guy was basically paid to put together dirt on Trump. And what it was ridiculously wild allegations. It was stuff saying that Trump was paying Russian hookers to urinate on a bed that Barack Obama was then going to be staying on. I mean, stuff like that. Ridiculous stuff. And this is something that was completely unsubstantiated, and it was actually circling around in press circles for a while. And nobody ran with it because it was completely unsubstantiated and almost certainly 100% false. And in fact, some of it was verifiably 100% false. Like the fact that they said one of Trump's lawyers, Michael Cohen, it was part of the dossier. It said that Michael Cohen went to Prague and apparently did some shady dealings with some people that may be connected to Vladimir Putin or the Russian government or something of the sort. And it turns out it was a completely different Michael Cohen. It wasn't even that guy. The real Michael Cohen actually hadn't been to Prague. So that was completely 100% verifiably false. And these other allegations, again, came by this guy who was paid to dig up dirt, basically came up with these completely wild, baseless, unsubstantiated allegations about Trump. And no one ran with it because it was totally BS, almost certainly. But then BuzzFeed does. They run with it and they present it like it's actually true. And then CNN, to a lesser extent, also ran with it, but they basically had more so of a caveat saying, hey, this is unsubstantiated and all that. BuzzFeed didn't really do that. And it's funny because this was right after they were saying that it was fake news that got Donald Trump elected, and then they come out with stuff like this. I mean, you can't make it up. But this is just an example of how the media was at war with Trump, and they are absolutely 100% trying to prop up the idea of collusion between Trump and the Russians. They are willing to they're so desperate to try to prove this or make people believe this that they're willing to put out completely unsubstantiated claims. And that just shows the level the media will stoop to try to sink Donald Trump and his administration. And then you had leaks starting to come out, more, really important leaks were starting to come out, like phone calls that Michael Flynn was having with the then National Security Advisor Michael Flynn was having with the Russian ambassador. And this article here is from Breitbart that breaks that down. House Intel, this was from February 14th. House Intel chairman says Flynn call leakers broke the law and belong in jail. Oh, yes. House Intelligence Committee Chairman David Nunes, Republican California, said Tuesday that those who leaked the contents of former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn's phone calls, quote, belong in jail. That's 9 leakers that all belong in jail, Nunes said. Those 9 people that broke the law, clearly, by leaking classified information to anybody. Flynn resigned late Monday night after a Washington Post report on February 9th said that he had privately discussed U.S. sanctions against Russia with a Russian ambassador during phone calls in December, despite assertions by Trump officials, including the vice president, that he had never done so. The Post reports cited 9 anonymous current and former officials who were in senior positions at multiple agencies who, quote, had access to reports from U.S. intelligence and law enforcement agencies that routinely monitored the communications of Russian diplomats. And again, this would fall under the FISA. They would have to get a FISA court authority to actually be able to, if they thought Flynn was a Russian agent and he was colluding with the Russians, they would have to have authorization from the FISA court to be able to actually monitor what he is saying, because he is an American citizen. They can listen to the Russian ambassador all day long, but they can't go listening to what Flynn is saying. And then this stuff, the transcript of this call, gets leaked to the media. And this, again, shows how there's collusion between people in the intelligence community and people in the media to put forward this narrative that Trump and his people in his campaign are Russian agents. All of those officials said Flynn's references to the U.S. To the election-related sanctions were explicit, the report said. Nunes says he also wanted to know how U.S. intelligence agencies were wiretapping Flynn's calls, which he said may have also been illegal. The chairman said there are only 2 ways that intelligence agencies can listen in on an American's phone call: after obtaining a warrant, or inadvertently, such as in the case of Flynn speaking with a foreign official being spied on, which the report suggests was the case. Nunes says it's pretty clear that there was no warrant, so they shouldn't be listening to what he's saying if that's the case. It's pretty clear that's not the case, he said. I'm pretty sure the FBI did not have a warrant on Michael Flynn. To listen to an American's phone call, you would have to go to a court. There'd be all the paperwork there, so I'm guessing that doesn't exist. In case Flynn was speaking to a foreign official, Russian Ambassador Sergei Kislyak, in the case, Nunes said there should have been a process to mask Flynn's identity, and this is key. Unless, quote, unless there's a high-level national security issue, and then someone would have to unmask the name, unless at the highest levels they have to unmask the name, Nunes said. It's a very high threshold to unmask an American citizen's name. That's a very high threshold, almost unprecedented. And if you were going to unmask it, it seems like you would immediately go get a warrant. If they did that, how does all that get out to the public, which is another leak of classified information, he added. Whoever did it, it's illegal. Yeah, and I mean, that's very key, because even if they had the FISA court order, this stuff getting leaked would be illegal. But it seems like they might not have even had the authorization to be listening to him in the first place. So more and more, this seems like this may be quite a big scandal, actually. I mean, this is just insane. And you know, the media, the Democrats, they just continue to double down on this narrative. I mean, it's insane. It is absolutely crazy. And then phone calls actually wind up getting leaked. Donald Trump's phone calls to the Mexican president, to the Australian prime minister, I believe, they wind up actually getting leaked. And this is another example of leftovers, almost certainly leftovers from the Obama administration within the Trump administration now, that are colluding with the media to leak this kind of stuff. This is from Fox News. Trump, leaked transcripts of Mexico, Australia calls disgraceful. This is from February 6, 2017. President Trump on Saturday denounced the leaks of transcripts of his telephone conversations with leaders of Australia and Mexico as disgraceful, and said his administration is searching very, very hard for the leakers. Trump, speaking to Fox News, accused Obama people of giving news organizations embarrassing details of his recent tense phone conversations with his Australian and Mexican counterparts, and said that the holdovers from the Obama administration still serving on this White House and National Security Council staff were being replaced. And I mean, good grief, that's what needs to happen. He needs to clean house, because all these people, it's getting to the point where it's almost sedition. Quote, it's a disgrace that they leaked it because it's very much against our country, Trump said. without stating why he believed that career civil servants who work in Democratic and Republican administrations were the source of the leaks. It's a very dangerous thing for this country, he said. And it is, because you've got people that are supposed to be working alongside and for the president that are politically motivated to undermine the president of the United States and are engaging in criminal activity to do so. That's the kind of thing where you got to start purging people. And now I want to get into a little bit of what some key people were saying about the intelligence community, because supposedly, you know, Trump was at war with the intelligence community because he's saying that these leaks are illegal. He's saying these leaks are bad, and apparently that means he's against the intelligence community somehow, some way. And I want to give you a little bit of insight into the former CIA director, John Brennan, a guy who was openly against Donald Trump, okay, the head of the CIA. All right, so this is another, another bit of information that might support the theory that maybe these intelligence communities were doing some very politically motivated and potentially criminal behavior. So this is from Yahoo News. CIA director warns Trump to watch what he says. Be careful on Russia. This is from January 15th. CIA Director John Brennan on Sunday offered a stern parting message for Donald Trump days before the Republican U.S. president-elect takes office, cautioning him against loosening sanctions on Russia and warning him to watch what he says. Again, someone who's supposed to be bipartisan. Brennan rebukes Trump for comparing U.S. intelligence agencies to Nazi Germany in comments by the outgoing CIA chief that reflected the extraordinary friction between the incoming president and the 17 intelligence agencies he will begin to command once he takes office. Yeah, well, that is Nazi Germany status when you're, blackmailing people with, information that you gathered through spying on them illegally. In an interview with Fox News Sunday, Brennan questioned the message sent out to the world if the president-elect broadcast that he does not have confidence in the United States' own intelligence agencies. Quote, "What I do find outrageous is equating the intelligence community with Nazi Germany. I do take great umbrage at that, and there's no basis for Mr. Trump to point fingers at the intelligence community for leaking information that was already available publicly," Brennan said. So, Why would all these intelligence agencies, why would they have a FISA court order in June, get turned down, and then come back in October, right before the election, when they got turned down because there wasn't enough evidence to really pursue this? Why would they do that? I don't know. But when you have things like the head of the CIA so openly against Donald Trump and his administration, openly, then that definitely supports the theory that there may have been some serious political motivation here, and it needs to be looked into. And then, of course, we've got Chucky Schumer from InfoWars. Flashback: Chuck Schumer predicts intelligence war against Trump. This is from February 15th. When Chuck Schumer went on Rachel Maddow's program in January, he made a sinister comment about U.S. intelligence agencies being, quote, very upset with Trump. Schumer said, "You take on the intelligence community, they have 6 ways from Sunday at getting back at you." Very cryptic. Now, I wonder what that would mean, huh? They have 6 ways at Sunday from getting back at you? How would the intelligence community get back at Trump? Maybe by engaging in a witch hunt against him? Maybe by leaking classified information to the media, who is also colluding in this effort to undermine him? Maybe, just maybe, I don't know. Not saying that's the case. I'm just saying when you look at the evidence, the more and more you start to look at it, the more it paints a picture that illustrates that may very well be the case. And now we move to the media. This is another example of how hysterical the media is about all this, when again there is nothing real here. There's no real evidence that's been brought forward of any kind of collusion. But if you just looked at the media headlines and what people in the mainstream media are saying, you'd think it was the biggest scandal since Watergate. Quite literally. Okay, this is from Fox News. Sean Hannity. Comparing Flynn affair to 9/11, Pearl Harbor shows media in meltdown. This is from February 16th. Quote, no, when you have Chuck Todd of MSNBC, here's what he said after Flynn's resignation. Quote, "Good evening, I'm Chuck Todd here in Washington. Welcome to MTP Daily, and welcome to day one of what is arguably the biggest presidential scandal involving a foreign government since Iran-Contra. Oh my gosh, the biggest scandal ever in the world. It's like Nixon times a million. Let me set the record straight. Because so-called journalist Chuck Todd refuses to see, yes, Mike Flynn was wrong. He misled the president and vice president about his call with the Russian ambassador, and yes, that's why he got fired by Trump, which I actually think was a mistake. Not because he was colluding with the Russians. But so far, there's been zero evidence that Flynn broke any law in any way, even the Logan Act, which they threw out there, which is ridiculous. And Fox News is reporting that there is zero indication that Flynn misled the FBI when they interviewed him. So yes, he got fired because he forgot exactly what happened. I mean, he had been talking with something like 30 some odd of his foreign counterparts because he's the incoming national security advisor. He wants to get to know all these people he's going to be communicating with. It was completely normal, even if the Russians did bring up sanctions. That's totally normal. And they present it like it's this big scandal. And it's absolutely insane. And it just illustrates the level the media is willing to go with all of this stuff. And consider Thomas Friedman, the award-winning liberal columnist from the New York Times. The issue is, what did he tell Trump? Friedman said of Flynn. Did he and Trump actually cook up this whole thing after the Russians did not respond harshly to the evidence of their eviction of their spies and diplomats? Trump actually tweeted out something positive encouragement of this. Did the two of them cook this all up? But wait, he wasn't finished. And it gets two other issues, he continued. This is, the first is, we have never taken seriously from the very beginning, Russia hacked our election. Hacked the election, he says. That was a 9/11 scale event. They attacked the core of our very democracy. That was a Pearl Harbor scale event. Yeah, the Russians hacking our election, which the FBI's own reports say they didn't actually even hack the election. That's equivalent to thousands of people being killed by terrorist attacks and us being bombed by Japan. Yeah, really equivalent. Absolute insane hysteria from the mainstream media, completely trying to blow this whole thing up out of proportion. And now we move to the current state of affairs. From Bloomberg, breaking: Sessions removes himself from Russia probes over envoy. So Senator Sessions, Attorney General Sessions, recused himself from any investigations involving Russia because he met with the Russian ambassador once or twice a long time ago. And I feel like that was a huge mistake because now, of course, the media is absolutely blowing it up. But here, this article explains the situation a bit. Attorney General Jeff Sessions removed himself from investigations into Russian interference in American politics and contacts with associates of President Donald Trump after the Justice Department acknowledged he had contacts with the Russian ambassador during the 2016 campaign. I have decided to recuse myself from any existing or future investigations of any matters related in any way to the campaign for President of the United States, Sessions said Thursday in a written statement as he opened a press conference in Washington. The move comes after the Justice Department confirmed Wednesday that Sessions spoke twice last year with Ambassador Sergei Kislyak while serving as a prominent supporter and advisor to Trump's presidential campaign. Sessions testified during the Senate confirmation hearing January 10th that, quote, I did not have communications with the Russians. In removing himself, Sessions put acting Deputy Attorney General Dana Bennett in charge of leading any election-related investigation. Bennett previously served as U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia. While Bennett was nominated for the Virginia post by former President Barack Obama, Trump's team chose Bennett to serve as acting deputy after firing Sally Yates, an Obama administration holdover who refused to enforce the president's controversial travel ban from 7 mostly Muslim countries. Sessions said his decision came after several weeks of consultation with senior career officials in the Justice Department. And what happened is he was asked by Senator Al Franken, he was asked basically if he had had any contact with anyone from the Russian government involved pertaining to the Trump campaign, because he was a surrogate for the Trump campaign. And he said that basically he hadn't. And yes, he may have worded that poorly, because what he meant was that he was meeting as a member of the Senate. He wasn't meeting as a campaign surrogate. And he said that he in no way talked with any Russian officials about the campaign. That was true. They took what he said and they're playing semantics. They're totally twisting it, and they're trying to say that he lied, which wasn't true. And then he comes out and he recuses himself. And apparently Donald Trump was furious about this. And it's completely insane. So this whole Russian narrative is absolutely heated